Hey everybody, this is Paul Welburn, and I'm teaching Faith Baptist Church Sunday School. We meeting in person tomorrow, 9:45, but we're still doing online Sunday School for those who are at home and unable to attend in person. So we are still looking in First Kings, and 1 Kings 17 is the chapter we're going to be in. We're still looking at Elijah. Last week, whenever we left Elijah, he was with the widow. He had to leave Israel. Ahab was the bad king in Israel, Jezebel his wife, if you're familiar with the Bible. So there was persecution. Jezebel led a lot of that persecution. And so Elijah had to flee to an area and basically be kept alive from the ravens and that sort of thing. Part of what he had said to the people there in Israel is that there was going to be a drought, judgment from God in the form of a drought. And that drought actually lasted for 3 years and 6 months. Looking in the book of James, you can see that. But he had to flee and go to an area. Then, just like what we face as believers, we are affected by the things around us, and we're not immune to bad things. So the drought affected him as well. He had to leave and go to another area, and he went actually to the Phoenician area, which was not an area that believed in the true God. Remember, this is Old Testament, so you don't say, "Oh, they believed in Jesus." No, they believed in God. Jesus hadn't came yet in form of Messiah. So, anyway, he met a widow that was part of this pagan culture in Phoenicia. She recognized Elijah, and Elijah said, "Make me some bread first." She said, "I don't have enough to make for myself or my son." And he said, "Do it, and you will be blessed." And so she did, and the grain and oil did not run out. And it did not run out really until the drought was subsided, which again, 3 years and 6 months later. So we don't know how far into the drought this was, if it was like a remaining 2.5 years or whatever that the grain and oil lasted. But it lasted. So we left Elijah there, and the son, we don't know how old the son is. I always imagine somebody around like 9 years old, 8 or 9 years old. But there had been great famine and starvation. And so the lady had said last week, "I'm getting ready to fix our last meal and then we're going to die." So they must have been severely malnourished and just on the brink of death. And so the son may have been just really frail and small. So we're looking at this. And so 1 Kings chapter 17, verses 17 to 18. After this, the son of the woman who owned the house became ill. So that son, and his illness got worse until he stopped breathing. And she said to Elijah, "Man of God, what do you have against me? Have you came to call attention to my iniquity so that my son is put to death?" Now back then, and really still nowadays, people looked at physical infirmity or bad things with like sickness as a judgment from God. And we don't know what this, we don't know the story about this woman. You know, she was a widow, and she'd obviously experienced hardship from that standpoint. Also, lack of food and had been an issue. But she felt guilty, and so whenever something had happened to her son, she's like, are you here just to bring light to the sins that I've committed?" We don't know. We feel like she was not a believer early on because she said to Elijah, "Your God, not our God." But we do feel like after the grain and oil that she began to see God, the true God that Elijah worshiped, not Baal, as the God to worship. And so now she's like, "Great, I've changed. I've made this change in my life. My son dies. Why is it like this?" And so Elijah then goes on to speak up for her behalf. And you see bad things happen to folks. I know a friend there. Well, his daughter, his wife passed away, and he's a really good guy. And his daughter started college, moved in just this week, and my heart goes out to him. My heart goes out to her. He lost his wife, and she lost her mom back earlier this year. And you see things like that, and it was very sudden. And it's like, bad things happening to good people, and you question that. Elijah questioned this, and he went on to speak on her behalf to say, "Okay, God." And C.S. Lewis had said that pain is a megaphone, God's megaphone to a lost world. I made some notes. He whispers to us in our pleasures, I'll say this. Yesterday, I went to a grocery store in Winston-Salem, and they had my favorite coffee. It's this pumpkin spice. It's a certain brand. And I know you're thinking, he's crazy. It's August. But I'm ready for fall. I love fall. Fall and spring. Fall's my favorite. Spring is probably my second favorite. I like the transition months because you have those change in temperatures. It's not the extremes of summer and the extremes of winter. So I stood there and looked, and they had a whole display set up with pumpkin spice coffee, um, snacks, Harry and David snacks, which is overpriced, but still you look at it and you're like, wow, this is great. Pretzels, pumpkin spice pretzels. I actually looked at it and just kind of teared up. I thought, this is fantastic. So God whispers to us in our pleasures like this. I know it sounds really shallow, but still, true confession time. Um, he speaks to us in our conscience, but he shouts in our pains. It's his megaphone to arouse a deaf world. I remember my dad put that on a sign. We have a church sign on a busy road, and Dad put that, pain is God's megaphone to a deaf world. And it is. It's one of those attention getter moments whenever something bad happens. And no matter where you are at in your life, if you are steady in church every Sunday and Wednesday or whatever, or if you're not in church, or if you're not, whatever, whenever something bad happens, it's usually an attention getter. And it's kind of like, okay, why is this happening? Where are things in my life right now? And so the widow, she had been in a good spot where she had trusted God, fed Elijah first, then her food was plentiful, her son still died. And you see that in life. You see situations with people whenever there's good things that happen to them and you think things are on track, and then very quickly something bad happens. And it's like, okay, God, what's the purpose in this? 1 Kings 17, verses 19 through 21. But Elijah said to her, give me your son. So he took him from her arms, brought him up to the upstairs room where he was staying, laid him on his own bed, and then he cried out to the Lord and said, Lord God, why have you also brought tragedy on the widow I'm staying with by killing her son? He's pretty bold saying that to God like that. Why did you kill her son? Why did you do this, God? And again, those times in our own lives where we have those moments. Then he stretched himself out over the boy 3 times, and he cried out to the Lord and said, Lord my God, please let this boy's life come into him again. And, we get involved with other people and helping out situations. We have prayer request time at church. And I know in our Sunday school class, there's been prayer requests. We have a church member that her nephew has just had a real struggle all his life with his health. And it's serious. It's very serious, especially right now. We have other church members that are battling different types of illnesses, physical and emotional. I have a neighbor whose mom is just in a real bad situation. And so it's her mom, but also her husband sees this lady as his own. He lost his mom and dad a while back, and so it's been tough. And so it's been like a roller coaster. I talked to them last night, and again this morning. It's just a roller coaster. They are dedicated believers. They are wonderful parents to their own kids, and they are a good testimony. And it's still a struggle. And here on this earth, again, that earthly perspective, we have those struggles. And so Elijah, he spoke, he thought, okay, he himself had been in a difficult situation. He had been out, he had angered Ahab and Jezebel, had to flee his country, went here to this widow's house, and then her son dies. And so he petitioned God in prayer. And he was definitely a prayer warrior. And so, when have you seen somebody really, really bear down in prayer in a time of need? 1 Kings chapter 17, verses 20 through 24. The Lord listened to Elijah, and the boy's life came into him again, and he lived. Then Elijah took the boy and brought him down from the upstairs room into her house and gave him to his mother. And Elijah said, look, your son is alive. The woman said to him, now I know you are a man of God, and the Lord's word from your mouth is true. People see actions and see things, and that does affect their belief. And God is not some kind of healing Santa Claus. He's not somebody that if you just pray hard enough, all these bad things that are happening to folks are just going to be miraculously healed. I've experienced that in my own life with my dad. I know whenever people were praying for his health, some would say, just pray and God will do a miracle. Yeah, God did do a miracle. He took him home in February 15, 2012 to be in heaven, and the ultimate healing took place. I know of another person that had a similar health situation as my dad, and was brain tumor. I'll go ahead and say it is brain tumor, and it's something that a lot of people do not survive. And this person that I found out they had a brain tumor, and they did well. I know of another person that I work with, and he had a brain tumor, and he's doing well. He's an MRI tech scanning patients, and so you see those situations and you think, well, why didn't God intervene in this situation? And because I mean, you may be seeing the story of the widow, and you may have lost a child, thinking, well, I prayed more than 3 times, and what was the difference? And again, it's our perspective on earth, this life. This is not all there is. God's healing comes in all kinds of different forms, and sometimes that healing comes in to taking somebody on to heaven. So, this is a great passage. James chapter 5 talks about Elijah's prayers, especially for those of you who are at home. I remember when I was a child, there was a lady, Mrs. Jackson, Blanche Jackson. She couldn't get her out of her house. She became basically at home. And Dad would always refer to her as a prayer warrior, and he would give her names of people to pray for, and she would pray. And that was what she did. She wasn't able to be there at church in person, but she sure prayed. And I think about that and Elijah and godly people. Hopefully you're watching this and it's strengthening you to pray for others, pray for our churches, and especially right now, pray for discernment. And anyway, thank you for tuning in. Next week, tune back in, and hopefully for those who we can see in person, we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks.